to the Awaken Feminine podcast. I'm your host, 𝐿𝐼, and today I have the beautiful Zangden Lhamo with me. She is a universal mother guiding her children to know themselves, and she has over 50 years experience studying and practicing Eastern spirituality. I can't believe it's 50 years because you look freaking amazing. Did you start when you were a baby?
There may be some truth in that. That's a whole other story.
You got some secret youth, secrets, to stay youthful going on that you need to share.
I think it's a lot of it's just attitude.
I think so too.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, Zangden, you've been on my podcast before. We were just talking before, and I was going, when did you come on my podcast? And I forgot to look, but it would have been around 2 years ago because I met you through our friend Nicolette. And
Yes,
that was when I
right.
was creating the book, The Awakened Feminine. So it would be 2 years ago.
Yes.
It's crazy how fast time goes. It really
Flowing,
just,
hasn't it?
yeah, it's crazy.
It's flowing. It really has. I can't believe it. And I'm so honored to be here again. Thank you.
Yeah.
To share.
And I know there's lots of things that have changed since we've last spoken. So before we get started, though, I would really love for you to answer this question for me. You've answered it before, but I'm sure it's probably changed a little bit, or maybe it hasn't. I don't know. What's your current definition of the awakened feminine?
Okay. I firmly believe the awakened feminine is a woman who no longer feels she has to please everybody else all the time, that sort of sense of having to please others. A woman who knows what her reason for being is, and that goes beyond so many things. And someone who's really empowered in themselves where they're quite comfortable saying no in situations. And I think that's a really big one for women. And I'm very guilty of it myself and still learning that I say yes, and then I realize I should have said no. And then I've learned also that it's okay to go back and say no after you've said yes. Because we really need to protect our energy. I think a lot of women, especially women who are more awakened, have a lot going on in their lives and they're of service. So that is important, to protect our energy, to protect who and what we're doing, and why we're doing that. And it can very easily others can very easily tap into us and start to dilute that energy or drain it, and it becomes exhausting for us then. So I think being an awakened feminine is being aware of those kind of, I call them leakages, that sort of like leaking our energy and leaking our power in the world, because we need to be really strong in ourselves to hold that together.
I love that answer. There's so much in that, and I think it really ties beautifully with what we're talking about, which is seeking the self today.
Absolutely, because we can. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, particularly because I've been married for 40 years, and before that had quite a lot of different relationships. So it gives you an indication I'm quite elderly. So so the interesting
when
thing
you say
is,
elderly, I'm just like, what?
I'm an elder. There you go. I can say that quite confidently.
You can say you're an elder, but when you say elderly, it's like...
I said it to make you laugh. but, you know, for me, what I see particularly in my own journey, of course, and what has brought me to sort of work with the feminine and really tap into that from a younger age. But I also still see now in women, and maybe in some instances even more than in previous generations, is they are still always trying to please a man or gain a man's attention, in not being in their own power. They will sell out themselves to please a man. And that makes me very sad.
That is so interesting that you say that, because I used to do that. I no longer do. But, you know, when you say women do, like, I think, I don't even know where it comes from. Do you know where it comes from?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, it's obviously some instinct, because I think almost all women do it. Even women that are super successful, powerful, still can be in the most tumultuous relationships. In fact, sometimes more so, because there's a power struggle. And I'm not saying, you know, that it's lovely to please our partners. Of course, I'm not saying that in a not being generous, loving way. But I think that we tend to lower our own value or accept devaluing talk about us, and believe it, or buy into it. Like, say, if a man says, I don't like your hair like that, you know, I like it a different way, we will feel all sort of sad inside and go and change our hair to try and please them. Or, you know, I don't like it when you do such and such. Or this whole, you know, my husband said, I'm allowed to do something. I hear that a lot. You know, my husband said, oh, I'm allowed to go. And I find that breaks my heart.
Did you go through that where you were, you know, lowering your value? Yeah. Can you share a bit about, you know, what made you realize your own power?
I come from a generation where, you know, women were homemakers. Like, my mother never worked a day in her life, apart from being, which is a huge job, being a mother and a wife. And that is kind of like, to me, the ultimate, you know, to be able to do that. It's an honor to do that. And it's part of being a loving woman. But yeah, I found that when you kind of fall in love, you just want to please the other person, but that pleasing then becomes part of what continues to go on and on and on. And I mean, it can be the other way too. I mean, a lot of men are also the same. You know, they tend to start to, my father actually was a pleaser. So it's not just women, but I think women are more prone to do that. That men undermine our sense of self-worth. Now, I haven't had that personally, but I've seen that around me with others. My husband's been amazing in terms of valuing me, but also has tried to prevent me from doing some very important things that meant a lot to me. And if I hadn't pushed through and just said, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do this anyway, my life would be extremely, extremely different. So just as an example, there's probably 2 or 3 things major that actually created what I'm doing today and how I feel today about things. Is that I always wanted to be an artist, as in painting, right? And I'd done it since I was a very small child, and it was a dream. But, you know, family, everybody, it's a hobby. You know, it's not something that you aspire to do. You'll never make money. But inside of me, I always felt that they were wrong, that I had this ability to do these things. So when my mother died, I was 43, and I threw my whole life in turmoil. I just threw my job in and completely, it just made a big shift. And I'm like, I'm going to live now for myself, my purpose, what I need to do. So I came up against a lot of resistance from my partner, that I needed to have a job and whatever. But really, I believed so much in myself that within a few months, I had started to sell my art professionally, do a lot of commission work, and it was hugely successful for about 3 years when I actually pulled the pin myself. I didn't want to do it anymore, which is quite interesting because it was a life passion. And so that was one instance where I could have just given in and gone back and started working and believed what I'd been told. The other instance was I've always been on a spiritual path since I first had an awareness as a small child. I always had a belief and an awareness of other things. And I got into full-time photography and some videography. And I was given a job to do some videography for a yoga teacher, beautiful yoga teacher, and did the job. And as a sort of payment and gratitude, so she paid me, but in gratitude for what I did, she offered me yoga teacher training. So it was something I always wanted to do, but I couldn't afford it because, I was working. I've always been independent from my husband. I've always paid for my own things. And so I wanted to do this, and my husband tried everything to talk me out of it. You haven't got the time. How are you going to commit? You don't have the commitment. You're too busy. Lots of excuses to stop me doing it. But I went ahead and did it. And it was such a pivotal turning point because I knew in my heart that teacher training was a step to do what I was born and put here to do, which was much more than the teacher training. It was just a door opening. So I think we have to be very aware if we get coerced or asked to not do certain things, that very certain thing that we want to do and we're being talked out of could be the stepping stone or the doorway opening to the fullness of your purpose being here.
Wow. Thank you for sharing those stories. They're big pivotal moments in your life as well, like the things you shared.
Huge.
Because
Huge.
Wow. And
I mean, if I'd just given in, and I was teetering, at times I was teetering under the pressure to not go ahead because I'm like, I don't know if I can live with this sort of nagging and thing. But I just believed in what I was doing, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me.
Yeah. And it's beautiful that you can, like, you did that. And I see so many women, even women around me that I know those stories where the husband said, oh, no. And then so they don't do it. And then there's that buildup of resentment. But, they're still in the relationship for, whatever reason, love, loyalty, children, whatever. But they're also dying inside because they're not being allowed to do the things that they want to do. So, yeah. How can women start seeing their own value and actually saying no or saying yes to them, saying no to their partner from the pressure, and saying yes to themselves?
Yeah, and I think it goes through partner's major thing because that's who we commit and spend our lives with. So that person is the person that we fall in love with or love, and we want to kind of not upset them. So women have an innate sense of not hurting people. And I had a conversation with someone the other day that they'd had issues with their husband, and they said, "Oh, but I don't want to. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that bitch, type person." And I said, like, there's a difference between being nasty and being, having that kind of revenge type attitude, and actually valuing yourself enough to step up. And it's okay to have that more wrathful feminine, that sort of, a lot of the Eastern traditions, which you would know, understand, especially in Buddhism and also in the yogic traditions, they have some wrathful deities. There's Kali and there's Vajrayogini and these types of deities, and these types of energies encourage women to tap into this stronger aspect of themselves, where you have a belief that just because you love someone doesn't mean that you have to sell yourself out to please people. That sometimes or not sometimes, but always being in your own power, being in your own integrity and your own authenticity. So not dying inside, which I know that feeling. Then you are able to really step up for everybody. And the interesting thing is that with my partner and my husband, that since I have become much more empowered, much more about saying, no, I'm going to do this anyway, he has developed so much more respect and honoring and love for me that I never had when I was younger, when I was more of a subservient type of a person, I'm more a people pleaser. He adores me now in a way that I always wanted to be adored, because he respects me. And I think when we sell out, we're no longer respected, even if, people like to control us, but we don't realize we're actually being disrespected.
Yeah.
It's not an
I
easy
think
thing,
Yeah. And sometimes I think it's not an intentional disrespect. It's just because
No,
you
no,
are
no,
not
no.
respecting
It's a
yourself that,
programming.
yeah,
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 it's programming.
yeah, yeah.
It's how we've been indoctrinated. Mm. So
Mm,
it's things we have to learn. It's actually committing to learn. And when we do this, we're healing ourselves. So it's like a wound. They're wounds that we have, that we either, if you believe in past lives, we've come in with some of those wounds from previous experiences. It can be experiences we've had in this life. And very often, a lot of it's associated with, say, childhood sexual abuse, which is really quite common in some ways, or just childhood abuse in other ways, being told you're stupid, you're an idiot. Thank God I wasn't told that as a child, but I was sexually abused. So I think that comes up with a feeling that you don't deserve to be fully your own, fully in your power, because there must be something wrong with you to have been treated like that. And we sort of develop these samskaras, as they're called, and vasanas that really are very hard to shift.
yeah.
And then we play them out over and over again. It is a victim mentality, and a lot of people think it's not. When you're in it, you think it's not. You think, oh, I'm not being a victim, but nobody cares about me. And it kind of defaults back to a 5-year-old mentality that that we're operating from. We're operating from an old program, and keeps playing in the background.
It's so interesting, because it's interesting how many women that have been on my podcast that have been sexually abused. I'm also someone that has been. When I was young, I think we talked about that maybe last time, and but it just completely baffles me how common it is. And
Yeah.
then that is, like you said, then we are running this program into adulthood,
Yes.
where these 5-year-olds, I had a conversation last week with Rebecca, and she was like, well, we're just all 3-year-olds in adult bodies. And I'm
It's
like,
true.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's true. It's true. We're all running around. We're all toddlers in older bodies. Yeah. Especially when there's like a trigger point, when that soft spot gets touched, then the autoplay comes in, and the 3-year-old or the 5-year-old comes in and acts out. Mm, you know.
So, talking about seeking the self, and I think,
Mm,
everything we've talked about, although, we're talking about how as women we should value ourselves more and be able to say yes to ourselves and no to someone, raining on our parade. And I think that comes down to a lot of actually finding who you are. Like for you, like art has always been a passion, so you went and did it. I actually want to ask you,
mm.
how come you pulled the plug? That's one question. But can you also, if it was a life passion, like why did you pull the plug?
Everybody
And
wants to
then,
know that.
and then maybe after that we'll go into the more about seeking the self, because I really am interested why you pulled the plug after you actually fought to go, I'm doing
Yeah.
this.
Yes. I mean, I'd broken up earlier relationships because they weren't supportive of my art. When I say supportive, I mean emotionally supportive. Like, oh, what are you paying for? That's stupid. It's stupid. So when I was younger, I would end relationships because of those kind of comments. And then I did fight very hard to do this, and then this inner, I'll sort of go back to that sort of wrathful self after my mother died, and a few things happened with where I was working. I was pastry cooking and doing things, and some incidents happened at my job, and I completely lost it. This sort of like fierce woman, fierce goddess came up inside of me and just like said, that's it. I've had enough of everything. And I thought, okay, I'm going to paint full time. So I did it for 3 years, like I said, and my husband had very kindly started to support me with that, and he'd bought a camera so I could take photos of subject matter for my paintings, because I was getting a lot of commission work. And it was amazing. Like really, I would do whole luxury houses. They'd ask me to paint original paintings, whatever. It was really amazing. And I got the camera. I started to take images, and then people started to comment on the images, and people started to ask me, could I do photo shoots for them? So I did, and it started to snowball. And then I ended up, I got asked to do an exhibition of photographs. So I did for a charity, and it took over my life that I no longer had time to paint. I still did, but not as much. The photography became all consuming. It was like this, it had a life of its own that I could never understand. I just could never understand how it happened. I just fell into it, and the cameras just came to me in the most weird ways. It was like a destiny thing. And I did that for 9 or 10 years, and I no longer do the photography either. I found with the art, interestingly, that the art to me, looking back, I still hope one day to do bits and pieces, but it's no longer like a deep passion. And I think it was actually when I was doing it and always wanted to do it, it was for my healing. It was like a way for me to heal parts of myself that was crying out. And then it kind of as I became more living a life of more purpose for myself and what I was passionate about and what was happening around me, then I no longer needed it. It became something that was there, but I didn't crave it anymore. It was like I was very happy doing whatever I was doing. So it was interesting.
So interesting how, like, where life takes you, you know, like you were
Well, and
doing
I
your
think
art
that's
and
important
then,
too. Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's really important to, because even with the photography, I mean, it went international. I went overseas working for theatre company, doing production photography and things. I think we need to be open to opportunities. And this is also a part of coming home to the self, because trusting that what comes to you is going to open up doors to what your path is. You know, what is bigger than us, because I really am firmly of the belief that we don't make up our purpose. We don't say, oh, I really want to be a singer, unless there is an innate thing that is going to come forth and make that happen. I think a lot of times our purpose is there and it has to be revealed to us.
mm,
It's already within us. So we don't seek it. We already are it. We're just covered up in layers and layers and layers of conditioning and trauma and disappointments and all of those things in life that's covered what we are seeking. But it's already there.
So when people say finding your purpose, you're not really finding it. You're kind of like digging it back out of you in a
Absolutely.
sense. Yeah.
Yes.
'Cause,
You're unveiling it or peeling back the layers or cracking open parts of yourself to it.
yeah.
It's like a buried treasure.
Hmm.
It's a buried treasure.
Whenever,
It's
oh yeah, you keep going.
No, I was just going to say it is, you know, in some traditions, you know, it's described as like a rare and precious diamond in the heart center, and it's covered in all kinds of corrosion and dirt and grime and old oily rags and all kinds of things that are closing and hiding it. And all of those things that are closing it are metaphors for things that have happened to us where we've become devalued, you know, the sexual abuse or the lack of recognition or, you know, being denigrated verbally or whatever it is. We've covered things up within ourselves. That's a wound, and it's practices and techniques and ways to uncover and reveal this diamond that is inside of us.
So then that kind of leads me to ask you, how did you unveil your diamond?
Okay. Number one, my big thing is definitely commitment to one thing consistently for a long period of time. So again, I'm getting back to my mother again, because she was very instrumental in this, which is very interesting because we carry a lot of all of us ancestral trauma from our DNA, you know. So when my mother was dying, she was told she had 2 months to live. And I was with my father, her primary carer at that point. I wasn't coping very well with this situation because I was kind of looking after my father as well. And my health suffered a lot. And I ended up getting the same illness that my mother was actually dying from. So she was dying from kidney failure caused by high blood pressure And at this point, I was diagnosed with dangerously high blood pressure. So I would have been about 40 at the time. And she ended up living 5 years after that, 4 or 5 years. But the thing is, once I got diagnosed with this high blood pressure, it just was like light bulb moment. Oh my God, I'm following the pattern of my mother, her health. And I had up to that point also, like, people would go, you're so much like your mother, And I'm like, I don't want to be, as much as I adored my mother, I didn't want to recreate that in my life. So I decided I needed to do some things that were going to support me to survive going through looking after her, and just to support me anyway. I realized I had a lot of weak spots. So I thought, what have I always wanted to do? And I'd done yoga since I was about 15, but here and there, nothing too serious, bits and pieces, more a little bit into the philosophy side of it more. So I decided I was going to commit to do a yoga practice regularly. So I did. And then back then, so I'm going 20 years back, more actually, 25 years ago, there was no studios like there is now. There was no online classes like there is now. There was no internet. So it's nothing of that nature. So I bought a book. Because you couldn't just go to your gym and do a yoga class, or you couldn't go to a yoga studio. There was nothing. So it was a very rare thing. So I bought a book and I practiced every asana in the book every day for years, every day, until I actually did join a studio, which was years later. The commitment was that every day that I did it, very rarely I would skip it, because it was an hour practice roughly I did. And I found even just doing the asana itself without doing many other, meditative type things. I did incorporate meditation later, but just doing that practice, really immersing myself in it. So not looking at it as a physical practice, looking at it as connecting to my deeper self through the movement. And within a few weeks, I started to change a lot about myself, not consciously. I used to smoke, and I used to smoke Marlboro Red, which was pretty strong cigarettes. And I found the cigarettes became totally impalatable. I couldn't smoke them. I'd just light them up and then I'd have to put it out. I stopped drinking alcohol. I found that red meat became impalatable to me. Now, none of these things were broadcast as something that would happen if you did yoga. As I said, back then there was not the information that there is now. So I just went with what I felt at the time, continued the practice. My blood pressure became on the low side of normal, and it's stayed like that ever since. So to me, I find that to find ourselves, because that was a really big step for me to connect to my body, mind, spirit connection. I used it as something to penetrate through the conditioning that I'd had. And I found that I started to then open up piece by piece. It didn't happen overnight. It's a big journey. I mean, like I said, I'm talking 25 years to the point that I'm at now, where, but obviously I sort of started saying no a lot many years ago, but just coming to that point of starting to unravel and disentangle this stuff that we have attached to through our life that we think is part of who we are. We think that our temper outbursts, and we think that our manic depression or whatever is who we are. And we don't realize that those behaviors are the physical manifestation of wounds that we've experienced.
Wow. That's profound. Yeah. I love that, you said committing to one thing, because, how many times do we get told to, have a full morning practice of 10 things before, you start your day, just one thing.
One thing,
And
because when you're doing a lot of things, there's no commitment. It's like, I liken it to pouring water over oil. It's not
yeah.
going to penetrate because it's too wide. And to make shifts in yourself, you have to go deep, not wide. So it's no good doing, 8 or 10 different types of modalities. I don't want to say any particular ones, but there's a lot available for people now, which is wonderful because people can choose what they are particularly interested in and what resonates. But for me, through my own experience, is that when you start going to sort of all these different random things and you're not actually embodying and working on yourself with one or two modalities in a deep way. So you're never going to crack open the surface of yourself by doing one breathwork session here and then going to a Kundalini dance next weekend and then going to a cacao ceremony the week after. And I mean, I honor all of those things, but to find something that you're passionate with and really go deep in that, go deep, because going wide, you're never going to crack open. That's how I feel. That's how I feel. Sometimes we need some kind of shock, like mine was a health situation. We need some kind of epiphany to make that happen. So that can be, it could be easy for me to say now because it's like 28 years down the track. So I can say that now quite easily. But at the time, it's and there's a lot more available for people now too, which back then there wasn't. You didn't have a choice of too many different things to do to go deep. But that's my thing, is commitment. I find with anything, even my students that come here, the ones that really commit to regular practice have massive breakthroughs in their life, and those that come once a week, not so much. Yeah.
I think it is that commitment. And also, I love that you said you committed and it was, the intention really is to connect mind, body, spirit. Because there's also, people that do the practice, but there is no intention. They're doing it because it's a checkbox exercise, which is very different to actually, very different to actually,
Absolutely.
really going deep into that and really committing to embodying the practice.
Yes, that's how I feel. I'm not a sports person, but I do understand. Like people that do a lot of running and swimming. I used to swim a lot, so I do understand that. It's a very meditative practice, and people like that, if you really commit to that, then you're going to become very good at it, or you're going to be really able to transcend through it, through what you're doing. And I think this is the same with the self. You can't you can't break through unless you make that commitment. Like nobody goes to the Olympics without training hard, very hard commitment. Nobody, gets to the top of their education of whatever profession they want to be by just studying randomly here and there. If you want to really commit, if you want to know who you are and you want to really make that commitment to find your authentic self and your purpose, then you really need to be full on committed. It's not a hobby. It's not some random thing that you can, like a weekend warrior type situation, weekend spirituality. It's 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 heavy work. It's hard work.
Hmm.
It's not easy.
I love it. Weekend warrior work. Does the uh, but it's so true though, because right now spirituality is trendy and people go off and
Yeah.
do, you know, the weekend retreats, but they don't
Weekend
do anything
warriors.
when they come back. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, even
Yeah.
paying, enormous amounts of money, and I'm not bagging. I think it's great, but enormous amounts of money to certain big names, and you do 4 or 5 days, and it's like, yes, I'm, on top of this, and then the crash landing comes a couple of weeks later. So, and it's like, what do I do now?
Mm.
My guru's not here, and my what do I do? Where do I go? It's a really a tough thing. And also connecting, speaking of teachers, we need to also be reminded that it's important to have a physical teacher, but it's also very important to be connected to your own inner teacher, to start to connect to your own intuition, because we don't listen. We are so full of external projections that we're no longer listening to what is being felt. And this is where, meditation practices, just sitting, 15 minutes every day, just sitting with yourself to practice to make that connection to what's actually going on inside you and with you, instead of constantly seeking for external, things to fill us up, because it
Mm.
never will. It's like I said, it's water on oil. It's not possible to penetrate.
Yeah. I want to ask you the question, do you, the one thing that to commit to, does it have to be like a quote unquote spiritual practice? You mentioned swimming before, running. Could it
Yeah,
be something like that
yeah,
that could, it's just really
absolutely.
committing and setting the intention to, have that connection?
Yes, I think so. I believe um, a lot of, because not everybody is inclined towards some kind of spiritual path. And doing things like running and swimming and things like that are very deeply meditative. I've done them and I love it. I mean, you really are, even walking, going for
Yeah.
walks on a regular basis, but not with your friends, because you're then expressing externally. You need to be by yourself. So it's that connection to self, and things will start to come up that you can look at, and you start to develop a muscle, like an internal muscle of tolerance and understanding about deeper aspects of yourself. A lot of things that come up won't be what you want to hear or see. There are things possibly about situations, about your life, that can be very difficult to deal with. But it all needs to be looked at in a kind of, I tend to think of us as warriors, look at it as this internal warrior of, like, I need to look at this, I need to face what's going on in myself to make those breakthroughs and those deeper connections. So yeah, you can do it through other things, but preferably, definitely alone, pursuits. So like bushwalking, walking, running, swimming, that type of thing is it,
Mm.
and it doesn't have to be. The interesting thing, though, is it will take you on a circle where you will, at some point, because of the nature of what you're doing, make a spiritual connection. Because it's impossible to not, when you are seeking who you really are, and make that connection to your authentic self. The self is a spiritual being. So once you start to make that connection, you will automatically then start to seek out more spiritual practices. But it doesn't have to start like that, definitely. And you might say that's never going to happen. And when I say spiritual, I mean, I'm not saying particularly the traditions that I'm involved in. You know, it may be a Christian tradition or whatever, something that just sits with you, that you can make that connection to yourself, whatever that tradition is, or whatever that sense of being here and what's bigger than us.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Like, I resonate with that because I think my connection started when I was committing. It's funny, it wasn't even like an actual practice. I was doing my coaching program and I was very committed to it. It was that commitment. Even though it wasn't a spiritual program, I was so committed to, because I'm like, I'm going to make this work. You know, I want to find out more about myself. Da, 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 da. And for the program, I think we had to do 5 swaps of sessions with different people to get our certification. I did like 33 or something like that. It was that commitment. And then it was because,
Yeah.
I know, yeah, it's the high achiever type A personality in me. but it was also because I was so, yeah, it was just because I was so committed to, you know, finding out about myself. And it was from
Yes.
doing all these sessions that I then started developing my spiritual connections. It was totally unintended. It was, yeah. So
Sure.
even though it wasn't like a spiritual practice I was committed to, it ended up taking me down that
Yeah.
path. So yeah,
Yeah.
just thought I'll give an example where
That's,
it wasn't as,
yeah. That's what happens.
yeah.
It's what happens. I've seen, you know, people training for Olympics and things like that, and they're very like they have that, as you know, like incredible commitment, and then they'll come to me and go, you know, I really need to calm down. I need to do some meditation. I need to, you know, connect to something on a more deeper level. So it's a natural progression, even if, and like I said, you know, you go with what type of spiritual connection calls you. So you don't have to say, oh, I'm going to be a yogi, or I'm going to be a Buddhist, or I'm going to whatever. You just whatever you feel comfortable with, you know, it might be just a tree hugger or whatever. It doesn't matter, but it definitely makes a connection with something that is beyond the physical self at some point of the exploration.
Yeah.
Of
And
this
I
sort of
mean,
seeking.
yeah. And for me, it
It
also
does.
like led me to you in, you know, in this, you know,
Yeah.
synchronistic way where Nicolette introduced me to you, and then, you know, and then we reconnected on the podcast, and I was like talking to you, I'm like, oh, I've been really interested in Vedic meditation, or transcendental, and you're like, oh, I teach that. I'm like, oh, you would be like the perfect person, because I have not found the person. And like as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, because I've been waiting for you before I go and
Yes,
learn it, because I was looking up all these people and I'm like, you know,
didn't
so
sit right.
it's,
Yeah, and that's very often
yeah,
the case too. You know, and you would have heard it, and probably a lot of those listening on the podcast would have heard it. You know, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. So you're not always going to get what you want in terms of seeking straight away. Sometimes you need to keep working on it, or waiting until the time is right, and then suddenly something will happen, a synchronistic occurrence that will come in that is perfect for you then to move forward into that thing, that particular way of being. Yeah,
yeah,
it's quite amazing.
it
Yeah, and for
is
me too. You
so
know,
amazing.
I've always you know, like been interested in something, and then I've just had to wait until things synchronized to bring for me to be able to move forward with some of the things that I wanted to. Yeah. I think one thing I would like to say is that probably talking about things that we need to do to find the self. But there's also things that we need to be aware of that can prevent us from that connection. And for me, the one that I've seen through what I do in people is fear. So fear comes up as a big metal block, big door that slams shut and stops them from going any further. At that point, they may come back, but it stops. Yeah, there's something they may have. They may start to have some kind of experience, like a phenomenon, and they get scared. Or, even say if they're not a spiritually minded person and they are doing things like, we were talking about physical activities, and then they will have some kind of a phenomena happens to them, and they will become very scared and back off. And that's, that's a really big thing for so many people. Yeah. So it's lack of commitment and fear are the two things that prevent people from discovering this magnificent being that they are.
Do you have any tips for people to help them stay committed and also overcome the fear? Especially, when you say they might come across some phenomenon. I remember when I first started connecting, it was like, I kept going because I happened to be doing the coaching, and then I had people that went, "No, you're not going crazy. It's okay. Keep going." But if it wasn't a time when I had that, I would have been like, okay, I just heard voices talking to me in my head and I was just writing scribbles and someone was talking to me. What the hell is going on? So can you please give please give us some tips on how to stay committed and to overcome?
Yes. Yeah. I've had students that have come here and then they've said to me after someone was touching me and I thought it was you, but then I opened my eyes and you were somewhere else. So, and then I never see them again, that type of thing. So it's really important if you are, and really the only way to have it's a really beautiful way to have a full, happy, joyous, productive life is to be connected to this authentic self that you are, because then you're no longer afraid of hardly anything. It's just like this incredible inner strength. But to break through those fears, it's important to connect with people who you trust. That might be a teacher, so could be your teacher, or someone that you trust, a friend, but preferably someone that maybe knows a little bit about this type of thing, that they can say to you, as they did to you, it's okay, you're not going crazy, this is part of what happens, and you're not you don't have entities around you trying to do this and that, you're just opening up to your own inner truth. So I think really seeking out an authentic teacher, seeking out a community that supports each other as well is a really good thing to do. Obviously, there's a lot of information now on the internet, which wasn't around when I was younger, that you can look up, different types of phenomena and find out that it is quite okay and normal. But it is really good to have someone you can turn to, someone you can just send a message or ring up and say, oh, this happened to me and I'm feeling I'm a bit strange, and that's where it's really good to have that support. When I was going through a lot of my things throughout my life, because I was born really wide open, and I didn't think I was going mad because I didn't know it until I realized that other people couldn't see or hear what I was seeing or hearing, and then it became kind of a bit a bit conflicting and very odd. But some things revved up when I was in my 30s, and I was thinking, am I going mad? And then my husband, who is completely straight person, comes to me and he said, I have to tell you, there's somebody in the house. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, like somebody that we can't see. I said, yeah. And I asked him to describe it. So he ended up going on like a parallel journey with me for a while with some of the phenomena that happened, which was really interesting, because he's not that kind of person and he doesn't do any kind of practices of any kind, but he was affected by the phenomena in the house. So
Interesting.
I thought, okay, I'm not going crazy, because he's really, really sane and he's seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. So it was, so it's good to have people to run it past. Yeah,
That's so
definitely.
interesting. Like, I always find it interesting when, you're so spiritual and then your husband's like completely like, no, that's not my thing. I'm
Yes.
I'm the same. My husband's like, you just do your thing and yeah, whatever.
Yes. Yeah. That's important. That's because we're kind of going full circle here, Kathy. We're going back to the start, where we're talking about being empowered in ourself, where we're quite comfortable doing our own thing without trying to coerce other people into it. Like not trying to sort of, I'm not trying to convert my husband to do this stuff, and he's not trying any longer to prevent me from doing it. So I think that's a really evolved and a really authentic relationship, when you can allow each other to be who they are without trying to change them.
Yes. I think it's really beautiful. Like, I mean, from what I hear from your relationship, it's fantastic. And I have that with my husband, so I'm very like grateful for that. Lots of inner work that was done. And
That's it.
it just keeps
Yeah,
getting better. It really just keeps getting better. I think, oh, it can't get any better, but then it gets better. It's just like,
that's
how?
beautiful.
But yeah.
Yeah, because you're
So
doing the work, and it gets back to that commitment. Commitment also to your relationship. That you're able to see through situations and go, okay, well, he's operating from his perspective, and that's okay. Without kind of getting into a big drama about his perspective. So I think it's important to be able to really value um, our own self and what is authentic for us, but also to realize that it is ourself and authentic for us and not anybody else. We can
yes.
come in connection with other people who resonate with us. We can come into connection with other people who have similar beliefs or follow a similar path to us. But how we see and feel through our physical senses and also our spiritual channels is unique to every one of us. There is nobody else that's going to see it the same way.
Yeah. I love that reminder because I think so often I see people going, this is the way, like, you just need to follow this way. And it's really
Just
our own
find those
way.
way. Yeah. That old Fleetwood
Yeah.
Mac song, Go Your Own Way, is kind of
Yeah.
100% on,
Yeah.
on it,
Gotta go
because
your
it
own
is.
way.
Exactly. Could be
Go
my
your
theme
own
song.
way.
It's true. I just really feel that it's so relevant to that we do. When we say, my partner doesn't understand me, he doesn't have to understand you. You just need to understand yourself.
Yes.
Nobody
Yes.
else has to understand you, and they can't, because they're not in your psyche. It's about understanding ourselves. Like I said, we can resonate with others. We can meet other people, especially girlfriends and things, where we can swap stories and we can, oh, that happened to me. But we really have to come back to our heart center and understand ourselves. We have to sit with ourselves, with warts and ugly and whatever arises, and really, see the magnificence of this creation that is once only performance in this life. And we need to value that. There's no second performance. This is it in this form. So the connections we make, the way we appear, the way we act, we are only going to get opportunity once. So we really need to sort of tap into that. And
yeah, I'm like, that's such a great, finishing message, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because you might have something else that you want to share. But I'm just looking at the time, and I want to and I wanted to ask you, we've talked about, really seeking the self and really valuing ourselves and how to uncover that purpose, how to, connect to our intuition and ourselves better. What's the take-home message that you would love our audience to, remember from our conversation? It could be from our conversation, or it might be something else that you really feel deeply that you want to share for them to take home with them.
Okay. I really love to see women starting to follow their heart in a way that is authentic to them. So, recapping on that is not what pleases other people, but coming back, so many women go through all kinds of, physical, like operations, different types of procedures, whatever, to please. They say it's to please themselves, but it's really, on some level to please a man or whatever, to be happy. I really would love to see women to be happy within themselves in their own unique way. I get very sad when I see women aren't happy or aren't at peace with who they are in their birth form, and that kind of, I think when we develop a real sense of who we are, then it doesn't matter. Like I'm getting more elderly, older, and
You're not going to reveal your
I'm
age?
happy now. Oh, well, I'm 65. I'm 66 this year. So, but the thing is, and I've had people kind of can't believe that I'm happier now than I've ever been. It's like, okay, like my hair's completely grey and, there's wrinkles and I've got, things coming up all over my skin and I've put on weight and all these things, right? So, whereas I used to be terrific and da 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 da. But I'm happier with how I am now in my body than I've ever been in my life, because I'm happy and connected to my true self, to my soul. And I think, this sort of seeking that happiness, seeking that fulfillment as an external thing, looking for things outside of ourselves, around us, to fulfill us, to try to become who you think you are, it's only a temporary temporary thing. It's like taking a Panadol or a Band-Aid, or there's no amount of procedures or no amount of clothes or no amount of houses or cars or clothes or whatever is going to fill that gap unless you make that connection to yourself. And then when you do, nothing else matters. it doesn't matter anymore. Just happy in yourself, whether you've got wrinkles or whatever, it's part of your story.
Thank you for that message. It's so beautiful. And yeah, it's really accepting yourself from the inside out, right?
From the inside. Because it's our soul, it's our magnificent soul, our what we were born with. That is, that's the brilliance, that's the beauty. The beauty's inside. It's got nothing to do with the physical appearance. The beauty's in the heart.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Zangden. That was a beautiful, beautiful take-home message. So I always get sad when I get to time to wrap up. I'm like, I haven't finished talking yet. But anyway, there's always another time.
Is Kathy going to cry? She seems like she's going to cry. Hearing myself. I'm a bit teary myself because it's so beautiful to share on your podcast, to share with other amazing women who are, the fact that they've tuned into your podcast means they're seeking, and that's amazing. That's magnificent. I love it. I love that.
Yes, I love it too. I love getting messages from people, saying, oh, that's helped me a lot, or, I'm really enjoying listening to your podcast. And yeah, it just makes my heart sing to, be able to share, Yeah, thank you. To share the love and wisdom of, yourself and the other women. Yeah, thank you. Zangden, I know you've got something special for our listeners, audience. So do you mind sharing what special thing you have for them?
Okay, so there's a link which I think you're going to share. Is that right, Kaki? You're sharing the link?
Yes, I will. I'll have it in the show notes and everything.
Yeah. So it's a part of what is going to be launched as the 𝐊𝐼𝐹 Academy, but it's still in the process. But the link takes you to a YouTube recording of a series that I did last year called The Sacred Path. And this one is on the 𝐷𝐿𝐴𝐻𝑒s. So the 𝐷𝐿𝐴𝐻𝑒s, which I thought was relevant to what we're talking about today in finding the authentic self. So the 𝐷𝐿𝐴𝐻𝑒s are encumbered behavior that prevents us from becoming our full authentic self. So the video is, I think it's 2 hours that you can watch, and it goes through the 5 𝐷𝐿𝐴𝐻𝑒s, which in yogic tradition and in Tibetan Buddhism they're called poisons. So what that means is that our behavior, these sort of toxic behavioral patterns we have, are actually poisoning us. And it also says how ways we can overcome them. So that's available to whoever would like to take the opportunity to go into that link and receive that gift. Yeah, beautiful.
That sounds amazing. I think I'm going to go and receive that gift.
I hope you do.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful offer for our audience. And if people want to, connect with you, find out more about you, where's the best place to go?
Yes. So you can contact me through my website, which I also think that is, so you have the link for that, Kaki, but it's,
yes, I will
if you
have
punch
that,
the 𝐊𝐼𝐹, you just punch the 𝐊𝐼𝐹 into Google and it will come up, because I appear to be the only person that's there with that. And you can go into my website, you can see what I'm offering, what I'm doing. And please always, also on social media. On social media, I'm actually under Helen Selmacy, brackets Zangden Lhamo. So you can connect with me there, and you can send me messages with any questions that you might have that you'd like to go into more. Or you can set up a meeting with me. We can chat, because I also do one-on-one mentoring, spiritual mentoring, that in many different types of practices and support through through things we just talked about and so many other things. Meditation techniques, Vedic meditation, which Kaki did. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing. So highly recommend Zangden. I'll have all your links in the show notes. And if people that are watching, catching the replay, want to ask Zangden or myself any questions, just put it in the comments, and I'll make sure Zangden gets the question so that she can answer it as well. So thank you once again so much for being here and just your beautiful light. I'm just very blessed and honored that you're here again to just share your amazing love and wisdom. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody that's tuned in. Much love. See you soon. Bye.